All right. So what I want to do is, introduce you all to our panelists and welcome you all to, to connecting with customers using context and empathy, which is a very big topic these days. Just real briefly, my name is Richard Harris. I have a consulting group called the Harris Consulting Group. I'm also the Director of Consulting Services for Sales Hacker. So whenever folks reach out to Max or Sales Hacker to say, hey, who do you know that can come in and help us train our sales team? That I'm the guy that comes to. So if you ever have questions, obviously, please come to me. We're happy to take a few minute phone calls and just see what we can do to get people started and headed in the right direction, as well as full-scale consulting. But the one thing I've been teaching a lot lately, which is really relevant to this piece, is that we hear a lot on the marketing side about content, and a lot of times what I tell people is that content is king, but context is the kingdom. And I feel that that is a really, really important piece, and it fits right into what this conference is, or what this webinar is about today. So I'm very excited to introduce everyone to the panel. So with that being said, let me first introduce Brandon Bruce from Cirrus Insights, who I've been using their tool for, gosh, I don't know how long. I feel like forever. It feels like it was one of the first tools that was out there to really help the sales rep in the email box. And I know it's a very crowded space now, and things are getting really fun and interesting in that space. But Brandon, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Also, we have Alex Brown, who's the Senior Product Manager at Assistant.to, or I don't know if it's Assistant.to or TO, depending on what level of hipsterness you are. So we appreciate you coming and joining us as well, Alex.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And Drew DeAugustino, I hope I pronounced that right. Drew, thank you for joining us from Crystal. I'm a new convert to Crystal, and I'm amazed by it. Like, I really love what it does. Just for me as a single individual, running an organization, I can only imagine what it does for an entire sales group. So thank you all for creating these wonderful tools that you've made, and really helping make that sales rep or that SDR or that sales leader or that sales team just so much more efficient. And I think that's a really, really critical piece. So Drew, welcome to the discussion.
Yeah, thanks.
Drew, yeah. Great. So really what I'd like to sort of start off with, and we'll definitely have room for questions at the end. So folks, please, send in your questions, and we'll be glad to put those there. One of the things we want to talk about is maybe a little bit of past, present, and future. And I'll ask sort of the same question to all three of you. When you first started this company, and I'm sure there are people on the line who are maybe where you guys are in terms of growth and maybe just getting their idea out of the box, right? Just about ready to launch something. In the past, sort of what was your aha moment? We'll maybe just start with Brandon and then go to Alex and then go to Drew. But what was the aha moment that made you go, okay, this is a major freaking pain and I gotta solve it?
Yeah, well, and I think that's exactly right. I mean, when we looked at starting Cirrus Insight, the aha moment was simply a recognition of pain. And in this case, the pain was spending a lot of time jumping back and forth between Gmail, where we would answer, 200 to 300 emails a day, which is pretty standard when you're in sales. We were constantly jumping back and forth between Gmail and Salesforce, where we had data about our prospects and customers. And jumping back and forth several hundred times a day just starts to get old really fast. So what we set out to build was something that would provide the context that we could get from Salesforce without having to go into Salesforce itself. We wanted to bring literally context, the facts and circumstances surrounding an opportunity into the inbox so that we could reply faster to customers. Speed was really at the key of our recognition. I mean, when we got an email in, we knew that the clock was ticking. The faster that we could get back in front of a customer, the better. They appreciated that, right? Everyone wants to be first in line to get a response when they're looking to buy something. So what we set out to build with Cirrus Insight was really a very simple tool instant gratification for our customers that wanted data to flow between the inbox and Salesforce, but with the capability of an enterprise tool. So everyone has customized Salesforce a lot, and they have different sales workflows that they use, and we wanted our app to reflect that so that it would work for us first. We were our own first customers, basically, but that it could also scale out and serve companies that have 1 or 2 people or companies that have 5 or 10,000 people. But that was really the moment that we said, and this was back in 2011, there really needs to be something that connects Gmail and Salesforce together. So we launched on the Salesforce App Exchange and got a lot of attention there, and it's been a great ride ever since. Now we've got almost 100,000 people using the platform, and the subsequent aha moments honestly have really come most from our customers saying, hey, this is great, but what we also need is more of this information or the ability to do this. We want the ability to track emails or sync calendar events between Google Calendar and Salesforce, or hey, that app that you made for Gmail, we also need that in Outlook and on our Android and our iPhones and iPads, because those are the different inboxes where we work. So the last several years has really been a process of iteration and delivering the same value proposition, Salesforce in your inbox across any type of inbox that salespeople are using. So that's a brief history of Cirrus Insight.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. So Alex, you want to sort of jump in with sort of your aha moment with Assistant.to? Is it 2.0? What is it?
You can say either or. I mean, yeah, we say Assistant.to, just kind of keeping in the guise of an assistant to somebody. But .to is probably the actual more proper way. But yeah, we say Assistant.to. I would say ours was really through, in my particular journey, was really through discovery. Product management is part of my career, but sales has been the vast majority of my career. And as a salesperson, you're always trying different things in order to get people to respond to you. The ultimate goal is you want to get them on the phone, right? You want to be able to tell your story. You want to be able to show them the passion that you have, not only for their business, but then be able to walk that through what your product is going to be able to solve for them. So landing a meeting is generally the key component to that entire process. So I discovered Assistant.to and then ended up working for Assistant.to simply because it was a hack that I knew that would awesomely just put my opportunity directly in front of the person, my schedule directly in front of that prospect, so that they could simply just choose a time, and without any other friction, we're both now committed to the meeting. What's great about that is that I automatically just saw that I was getting more responses, just simply by taking down the barrier of someone having to say, we're going to have to go back and forth on finding a common time. If there's any related interest at all at that moment when they're reading the context of my email, this kind of flows into what, Drew's going to talk about in a second, I'm sure, as well, with his aha moment. But if what I've said to that person relates and they're interested, and now I've put the available times that I can meet with them, and most people off the top of their head can pretty much say that, oh yeah, Monday of next week or Tuesday of next week is fairly open at this moment. They click on a time, I started getting a lot of responses back. So it just elevated my sales process. This simple hack just made it so I was booking more meetings, therefore getting in front of people and being able to tell my story.
Yeah, I agree. It has been my biggest pet peeve, until the last year maybe, that opening my calendar, going back and forth in email. I mean, it's just a terribly, terribly painful friction that is so simple, when you stop and think about it. So thanks for doing that and making that just that one little element, which is oftentimes the most important element. Defining next steps in the sales, stage is, when are we going to talk again? So
sure, and I'll throw a quick plug out if anyone wants to go to our website. We made a video that kind of encapsulates the friction of setting up a meeting and what that salesperson sometimes feels like on the other end. So if anyone wants to get a good laugh today, leading up into Halloween, I'll not give any endings away, but it's worth a watch.
It is good for Halloween week. We'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope it's as good as that YouTube where people walk in and out of the conference room like getting dropped off the phone. If you've never seen that, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
Drew, what was your aha moment in terms of building Crystal and getting you started?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think Crystal is younger in this context, and also it didn't come from a direct pain point, which is totally opposite of how I would usually approach a business. Which is kind of weird because you never, I guess, it's proof that there's no real formula for it. But Crystal, I started working on Crystal, from a technology end of it last year, and it was at a moment where I was studying both the social science aspect of this, because I had in the past managed a lot of engineers, and I don't have a typical engineering personality, so that creates a disconnect. So I learned about frameworks like DISC profiles, which really help your communication, help make your relationships healthier, more productive. So I realized that those work. So I was studying a lot about the social science aspect of this, and at the same time, going deeper into natural language processing with a few other people. And that kind of met at this intersection where it clicked in my mind that, wait a minute, I can apply this communication style and personality research to people that I don't know, as long as I can detect correlations in their writing style or communication style from people that I do know and apply to people that I don't. So after a few months of experimenting with this, the aha moment, I guess, came from the first widget that I built for Crystal, which was a way to detect someone's personality off of their LinkedIn profile and then provide insights on the best way to talk to them. So you can see how that could be really applicable right away in a sales context, but it really kind of bridges anybody who communicates with new people regularly for a living. So built Crystal as this very simple product that would just allow you to look up somebody and immediately have an idea for how to approach them in a conversation. Like I should go in straight to the point with this person and direct, or I should stay with details and be very factual with this person, or use expressive language with this person. And when I started using this for myself just for fun, I realized that this actually worked and had a really good effect on my conversations. Not in a manipulative way, but in a way that was kind of like bringing in a translator between me and somebody who spoke a different native language. And it just made our relationship and our communication immediately clearer. So it was that moment of just using it by myself, and then as soon as I started showing people, at the time I was working out at the Harvard Innovation Lab up in Cambridge, and there were a bunch of companies around me, and I was just taking it to them and asking them to try it out and use it. And based on the reactions I got from people, I kind of knew that I couldn't not pursue this idea. So I hired a first full-time engineer in January. We started cranking away on this, launched the product in March, along with our Gmail plugin, which was the first attempt to take this powerful personality data and apply it to communication. So we built this Gmail plugin that works like spell check to correct your emails as you type, and each for the personality of the recipient. And kind of took off since then. So that's about 6.5 months of being launched, almost 7 now. We've had about 150,000 users on the product, about 1,000 paying customers for the premium version of it, and it's allowed us to kind of parlay that early traction into a real business. And now we're working on creating something much bigger.
Yeah, I was going to say, in sales, and I don't know, Alex, and I even think Brandon, in your experience, you always talk about the different personality types, right? And there's a different makeup between what a salesperson does and what I feel like the opposite end is what an engineer does, right? They think differently. There's a different level of patience or urgency within that person. So I've done a lot of like DISC profiling, and I think we've all done Myers-Briggs stuff, and it's interesting to see you sort of taking it off raw data on the web, and then teaching you how to speak to that person, right? If you're talking to the head of sales or a CEO, I always call it last paragraph. Just get to the last paragraph for those people. They don't want to hear the long story. Engineers need a little bit more background, I've discovered. They need to understand how you got to the problem, not just the problem itself sometimes, because they want to examine, maybe there was something before the problem that could have, taken you in a different direction, which is usually true. So that's really fascinating stuff. I certainly see it not only from a sales conversation perspective, but even from a recruitment standpoint, understanding how to talk to the people you're going to recruit. would be really valuable as well. So I hope I didn't just blow up your roadmap.
There it goes.
But that leads really well into the point of context, right? That what you've done, Drew, is really help provide some greater level of context on the personal side, where I think that Brandon and Bruce, you're sort of approaching it from a data side, and I'd love to hear, from Brandon, how you guys use your data, how each of you use your tools presently to establish greater context in the realm of sales, and it can go into other departments as well. But I'd love to just sort of, maybe we'll go around the horn again, starting with Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is this is probably the first sales type webinar that's used the word empathy, right? We tend to think of it as like someone's feeling bad and we want to send them a card or something to help cheer them up. I mean, at its root, it's the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. So you get an app like Crystal that's going to help you understand, where is this person coming from a personality perspective? How do they approach and understand the world based on how do they communicate with the world and with other people? And then you've got Assistant.to that's saying, overall, we understand that people don't like to spend 20 emails back and forth trying to find a time to meet with each other. Like, we basically believe that overall, that's a frustrating experience for anybody. And that by the time you get to the end of that email trail, you're actually less interested in meeting with the person because it's been such a hassle to figure it out. Let's meet at Starbucks. Which Starbucks? What time? Well, I thought you meant the other day. Well, I'm on a different time zone, et cetera, et cetera. And it bogs down what started as an interesting relationship about, hey, let's try to figure out if this product or service is a match for you, and kind of devolves into an exercise where we've all had that experience where a prospect just bails on the whole thing because they're like, this is taking too much time. I don't want to do it. From where we come from, because we're bringing Salesforce into the inbox, empathy is not a word we tend to associate with CRM, right? I mean, CRM is a database, a bunch of data points, and we're not thinking, yeah, to really understand the feelings of my customer, let me go check the database. But it actually truly does help. I mean, when you've got a side panel streaming in data into Gmail or Outlook or to your mobile device whenever you're sending or receiving emails with your customers, it's letting you know these key signals. Are they opening the messages that you're sending them? In other words, are they engaged in this conversation or not? Where are they when they're opening those messages? Maybe they're on a work trip, maybe they're on a vacation. Maybe that explains why they're not writing back to you until a week later. Is there an open opportunity? Has it been open for a really long time? Is this a longer sales cycle than normal? Could the customer be feeling frustrated about that? Or should they be about ready to sign, and so we need to try to expedite it? One of the examples that we almost always tend to show in our demos will be the presentation of cases, in other words, support tickets from Salesforce. And a lot of times people say, well, that might be useful for our customer support team to have that. And we always encourage them to make sure their sales team has access to that data in Salesforce and in the inbox as well, because none of us have particularly good luck in closing deals when there's open support tickets. Difficult to say, sorry, you ready to sign? And then have the person come back and say, actually, I'm waiting for an answer on the 3 problems that I had last week. So you want to have all that information ready for you. And if I have another salesperson that's already been in touch with a customer, then I want to make the appropriate introduction and bow out of that conversation rather than trying to push it forward, not knowing that conversation has already happened. So we're trying to bring as much of that contextual relevant data from the CRM into the inbox, and then on the flip side, make it really, really easy for our customers, primarily salespeople, but also customer success folks that are customer facing, to put good data back into Salesforce. That's always been a major pain point for all of us in sales, is the friction between let's go out and make deals happen and let's keep track of everything we're doing so that we can understand the sales cycle and track deals through to completion. That aspect of sales, the manual data entry part, has never been particularly appealing to those of us that like to get out and talk to people a lot. more fun to talk than to spend, half a day on Friday trying to catch up and enter everything into the CRM to get credit for deals. So we tried to make that process as easy and automatic as possible so that people can literally update Salesforce as they work, is how we describe it. So when you're sending an email that's important, we'll automatically save it to Salesforce for you. You have a phone call and you want to take notes on it, put it in Salesforce. You don't have to leave your inbox to do it. So those are kind of the two sides of the coin that we try to match up with our customers for. Good data into the inbox and good inbox data back into the CRM.
That's great. And before we go on, I want to touch on something that you said at the beginning, which was, you don't hear people talk about empathy with sales in a lot of ways. And I think you're right. I think that's probably one of the biggest shifts in the last 12 to 18 months that I'm seeing in the industry as I talk to different companies, is that customers want you to be empathetic, but they don't necessarily want you to be sympathetic. They don't want you to feel sorry for them, but they do want you to be able to relate to them and tell a story that, gosh, I totally understand where you're coming from on that. And even if you don't understand, saying, gosh, I don't know what that feels like, but it sounds like it's really frustrating. Even that can be empathetic and gain some trust with your prospect that you're really listening to them, right? So it's a really valuable point. I actually, I'll do a small self-promotion. I wrote a blog post called "The Empathetic and Resilient Salesperson," talking about how does one become empathetic and still have that drive of a salesperson without sounding like an asshole, which I think is always a challenge for some of us in the sales world. So not all of us. So, but I'll stop there. Alex, how do what's your response sort of to this thought?
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of going with the theme of, empathy, that also is for the salesperson and what they're trying to accomplish in the given hours that they have to work with or connect with their customers during the day. So it's about speed as well. So if I'm a salesperson, the first thing I'm doing as I'm looking up who I'm communicating with, generally I'm going to whatever resources I have on the web to find out what's going on with the company, what's going on with them. Did they just get promoted? Did they have a new job? Where did they work previously? Do we have any common ground? Do we have anything that I can immediately connect with this person on so that they feel, or at least that 30 seconds of time that they scan the email, that there's some commonality that we share here, that maybe they want to open up and listen to what it is that I'm trying to present to them. But then just knowing that the salesperson, their job a lot of times, and it's not just a matter of being able to get that open as well, but you have 1,000 tasks that you're doing throughout the day. So you have to be able to move from one to the other. But if you're doing it right, there's an incredible amount of time investment involved in just sending an email out. If you blindly send an email out, chances are that someone might open it, maybe, but generally no action's going to actually take place. No one's going to respond to it because it wasn't well thought out. You didn't do your diligence. There's no thought behind it. And again, that's what's great about this panel today, is just from Cirrus Insight and Crystal, about now you have all the context you need to create that well thought out and designed email. So again, going back to my original point about speed, is that the last thing we want to be able to do is be able to show that person that their time does matter. And I use it all the time in emails to say, I know you're busy. You don't have a lot of time. So here's what I've done. I've included all the available times I have over these days right here in email for you. If you don't see one that works for you, just click on this button and then more times will show up for you. So they automatically know that if they are interested, I have thought about the fact that, hey, let's not go back and forth. Let's not trade a bunch of time. Let's just go ahead and let's get right to it and let's have a conversation. So it's speed for the salesperson. And then it's also just, again, going with what Brandon was saying, it's also showing some care and some concern that they are busy on the other receiving end, and you want to make it as simple as possible for them to connect with you.
Yeah, do you see a lot of people, I'm sure the answer is yes, but I'll ask anyways. You send out the first email in your cadence, right? And you're including those times that you're available, and people they're automatically choosing it even sort of before they respond to you. Yeah, let's talk. Are you seeing that happen more frequently?
Yeah, I mean, what we found when we first did really the studies and just tried to figure out how much time it takes to book an email, or excuse me, how much time it takes to book a meeting, we found that we could save someone roughly about 10 to 12 minutes by simply just putting it into emails. So yeah, people do, again, it goes back to the context, right? If there's something warm between you, they might just go right to it and just book the meeting, etc.
Right.
We've done all sorts of different ways. I've tried putting it at the top, in the middle of the email, as well as just at the bottom of it as well. I've tried all sorts of different ways. Nothing really has resonated one over the other, but again, it's all about the salesperson using it to the best of their ability. They know who they're talking to or should know who they're talking to and what they think is going to be the best use case for dropping those times in that email. It might be overly aggressive to go ahead and do it immediately. They might need to do it on the next email, but again, that's where the smart salesperson just comes in, knowing who their audience is and how to communicate with them.
Yeah, I've seen some data. I love how you save 10 to 12 minutes, and the flip side to that data is, well, what does that mean? And the data that I've seen is that it takes about 150 to 200 clicks to set a first meeting, right? As you're running through the process, and as you said, you've probably eliminated 20 of them, and that makes someone, not only does it make them more efficient and able to do a little bit more, but it also it creates instant empathy, I think, for their prospect, as you said, to go, oh my God, this is so much easier. Yes, I do want to talk to you. Let me just pick a time. So now it's not even so much, and I say this a lot too, is it's not always what you do as a business, but also how you do business. And you've combined those two things, very, very well, I think. So thank you.
We want people to book meetings in an email, pure and simple. One email and done. That's our goal.
Right.
That's constant striving, and that's what we think about on a daily basis.
Drew, how do you see all this? I mean, you're the one with whether Myers-Briggs or DISC and all this kind of stuff going on, right? Like you can probably help Alex determine, which is the right color based on the personality type that the button needs to be, to choose that meeting. So
I think just to expand upon what Brandon and Alex were talking about just now, I think there's two levels of empathy when you're talking about it in a sales context. And this is what I'm gathering as I'm just experimenting more myself. There's this broad layer, which is things that with a pretty good degree of confidence, you can apply to everybody and they're going to appreciate it and you're going to connect on a better level. I think that is things like saving their time by scheduling meetings and putting everything out there for them. It's having the information on hand and looking beforehand to make sure that you know what's going on in their life and what's going on with their company. Things that you can apply across the entire spectrum. And then there are these really good tools applying for that. From our perspective, I think we're going up to that deep level of empathy, which may not be just time effective or necessary across all these sales conversations. If you have 40 in a day, maybe only 5 to 10 of them are ones that you're truly going deep, trying to make that connection on a deeper level with. And I think where Crystal comes in is, where we live all day, is trying to get a much more accurate understanding of a person, what drives their behavior and how they are going to behave in given scenarios. So I think when you think about approaching somebody that you don't know, it's probably those two layers to think about. One is building in a process that is just naturally empathetic of the other person. And by doing that, you're probably separating yourself from 80 to 90% of all of the other people that are emailing them all day. And then the next level is that this person is somebody that I'm having a high impact email with, and it's not just maybe an initial introduction. Maybe this is something where the conversation is developing, and I still don't know them, but now we're talking about real substantial things. I think that's where you can truly separate yourself with just an open ear for, how they prefer to communicate. And that comes from a mix of tools like Crystal or just Google, just researching somebody and figuring out what they're like, and then developing that intuition over time. And I think thinking about that through frameworks like DISC, which is a behavioral framework, it kind of accelerates that learning and gives you a mental model to apply it from one person to another. Like I know Brandon, just from the times we met before, if I know how he likes to communicate in a given situation, I don't need to relearn that for somebody else. I just have to know that they're similar to Brandon and then approach them in the same way that I would approach him. So that's a level where you can just keep growing with your own intuition without any tools.
Yeah, maybe we should test you and have you read off for 3 of our personalities based on the public data you can find on us on LinkedIn and see how much you nail us. So I'm sure you've already figured that out.
Well, I'll say, I mean, for those of us that use Crystal, that's one of the reasons why it's such a viral application, is because one person installs it in an office and starts looking up personalities for all of their coworkers and starts to say, oh, now I finally understand,
right,
how this person works and where they're coming from.
Right.
And same with Assistant. I mean, what I think, because I was the recipient of an Assistant.to email before I became a user, but that's how that app tends to spread. Because when I get an email that just says, hey, Brandon, I'd like to show you a demo of this service, let's say, here are some available times if any work for you, that's a great email to receive for me. Like, I receive that as being a very respectful email, because without the times to choose from, I just need to reply back and say, yeah, that sounds good. And then it's inviting a whole email trail of, oh, well, I'm glad that sounds good. How does next week look? And then I got to say, next week looks pretty good, except for Wednesday and Thursday. Okay, what about Monday at 12? What time zone are you in? And it just really devolves at that point, and that's not what I'm looking for. But once you're able to use something as simple as just click a calendar event and it works, then I ended up installing Assistant.to, and pretty much everyone on our team here uses it for their meetings. And we see that for us, obviously we work with companies that use Salesforce as their CRM. That's our target. So when one person in an organization installs it and gets value out of quickly adding data into Salesforce and quickly being able to look up their customers and respond faster, and they get good marks for that, they're closing deals a bit faster, they're getting some better customer insight, the people tend to figure that out pretty fast, and then the app tends to spread within organizations. So it's interesting to see how all 3 applications have spread in different ways. On the positive side, as is true with most of the tools available now, all of them are really easy to install. I mean, I think all of them, to your point about clicks earlier, I think it takes 2 clicks to install each of our applications from the respective websites. It's a click on the call to action and a click to allow Chrome to add the extension to your browser, and you're up and running. So anyway, for those listening to the webinar that are interested, you're 6 clicks away from trying out 3 interesting apps that allow you to connect with your customers. It did not used to be that easy, as all of us know, to install and try out software, but it is now, thankfully.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have a conversation with every client about tools, what other tools, what's in your sales stack, right? Like that's the big post these days, what's going on with your sales stack. We actually have a big conference coming up in November here in San Francisco called Sales Stack that's going to address a lot of these issues and a lot of top-of-funnel stuff. So, if you guys, people listening who don't know about it, go check out the Sales Hacker website. We actually have a question coming in. I'd like to go ahead and ask it now because it feels very relevant. And I feel that we've answered it already, but I always like to repeat a question because it might provide some different context for the panelists to be able to go, oh, well, if you're asking it that way, this is how I would respond. So, and I'll throw the bone in the middle of the pit, and the 3 of you can sort of fight over who goes first. So the question comes from Colm Lennon, and Colm, thank you very much for submitting it. How does an inside sales rep or sales development rep gain an understanding of the buyer and their challenges to exhibit genuine empathy, right? So how do you use the different, all of these tools, maybe either individually or in conjunction with each of you to show genuine empathy, right? There's fake empathy doesn't go well, right? That's a used car salesman, right? And that's not what we're trying, any of us ever want to be or be associated with. So, how do you guys all see that sort of coming about based on what you guys have?
I'll take a quick first stab, which is just to say that one of the main characteristics that we've seen across all the sales teams that we serve and our own sales team, where people really stand out is curiosity. Are you truly interested in the person that you're trying to reach, and to the point of the question, their challenges and their pain points? And I think there's a number of different places that you go to look for that. Drew mentioned just simply Googling them earlier. Obviously, there's a lot of data in LinkedIn. Crystal can deliver you a nice, concise view of someone's personality from a lot of different data sources online. Our app, Cirrus Insight, will show you basically the context that's in Salesforce. So if someone in your company has already done some discovery, or you have automated tools that are feeding in lead scores, what conference you met them in, the fact they attended your happy hour, the fact that they've already talked with a sales rep a year ago and declined to advance but indicated interest in the future, all of those kind of signals play into the curiosity of the salesperson to try to find out what is this person truly interested in. Most of the commentators out there talking about sales tools and sales stack will refer to the stack trying to solve the puzzle of how do you connect with people the right way. So we very much view sales as a puzzle, and we're trying to get as much useful information in front of the SDR so as they go about their outreach, they have as much power at their fingertips as possible.
Drew, do you want to add to that, since with your interesting background into the psyche?
Yeah, I think and based on the publicity that Crystal's gotten and the kind of knee-jerk reaction a lot of people have to it before they understand what it is, I've had to have this conversation a lot, especially when it comes to looking at empathy versus manipulation or something like that. I think, first of all, when we're having a direct conversation or when we get a one-to-one email, it's pretty obvious if somebody is not being genuine or has intentions to manipulate you. We've got this certain sense, and we can just tell, and especially as you get more experience, you just understand the certain triggers that people have. But I guess I'm not sure if this answers the initial question very directly, but using just knowledge about a person or a tool like Crystal, to use the translator analogy before, it's kind of like going into a conversation and just bringing somebody to help you that speaks in the other language of the person. And I see that as much more of an empathetic activity than going into a conversation kind of how you always would, and it's just because of your process and you're without real consideration for the other person. And that's when we're talking about this personality stuff, or when we're just talking about my own time. Instead, it's about putting both of your schedule, not just your schedules, but your communication style, all these things on the same level, and going to somebody as a human being, as opposed to me kind of treating this person like a number because they appear this way in my database. And I basically, if I get a yes, I get a yes. If I get a no, I get a no. And then there's no humanity to it at all. And I think that carries out in all your conversations. So I think those are just my very vague thoughts to it.
Alex, you have anything to add?
I mean, nothing mind-blowing. It's just a matter. I think today in general, people receive so much communication that they can see through the fake, and I think it's just making sure that you're going out of your way to just customize your communication enough so that they don't see it as just some type of automated email that they're receiving. I think people are smart enough these days, and people receive enough of them to know the difference between time and effort and something that might have just been queued up in an automation process. So, take the time to just go in and make the adjustment and personalize it in any way. And I think by doing that, you stand out above and beyond most people that are out there. Just a little more effort always goes a long way.
Yeah. One of the things that I would, to go back to the question from Colm is, to exhibit genuine empathy, right? That's a tough thing. And there's some stuff that I talk to different people about, and ways that I try and teach that to SDRs particularly, or people in the inside sales team, is that genuine empathy comes from a certain level of curiosity, and it needs to be certainly natural curiosity. You also need to have a certain level of knowledge, but not sound like an expert. There's a difference between knowledgeable and being an expert. And for those things, that kind of equates to wisdom, that oftentimes you have to have gone through some life experiences to sort of make some of those connections. And then the other thing that's really important to sound genuine, Colm, is your tone of voice. And I'm sure everybody here has read, Aaron Ross' Predictable Revenue, at least 3 times. And I had a conversation with him a couple of months ago, and he said this was a great way to pitch this, is that the best tone of voice to use when you're talking to a prospect is one of the same tone of voice when you're either asking for or giving directions to someone. If you're lost and you're walking through a city and you've got to ask for directions and, your iPhone doesn't work anymore, you're at a very vulnerable spot, right? You're being totally open to a stranger and asking for help. And on the other side of that, and I think that's a great point. On the other side of that, if you're the person given directions, you're slowing down your tone of voice, your pace. You're making sure you speak eloquently and slowly. And for me, that's a great conversation. Right? That's how you try to exhibit some level of empathy. And so I like to share that with people a lot. And it's that vulnerability that matters. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll probably either upset a lot of people or people will go, yeah, you're right, is that I think women are naturally more aligned this way. Women, I see it all the time that women salespeople are just crushing the numbers oftentimes more than men because they're not the atypical frat boy sales guy, jock, aggressive mentality, but they come into the world just through nurture or nature, whatever you want to describe it, being slightly more nurturing, a little more curious, not always having to be sort of the loudest voice in the room. And I think women do a really, really good job of that. It's something I've been learning a lot from a lot of other sales leaders, as I continue just in my own journey of stuff. So I'll sort of stop there with that one. We're starting to get a couple more questions in, which is great. Before we do another question, is let's talk a little bit about the future, right? We've sort of talked about the past, we talked about the present, how we use it today. What's going on with you guys? Aside from me blowing up Drew's roadmap, what other exciting news does everybody want to announce today here on Sales Hacker?
I think on our side, and to build on the last thing that you said in answer to the question, Richard, I think what we're seeing with a lot of the sales tools these days, and a lot of the literature, honestly, that's being published, is an emphasis on speed and automation. So let's send more emails faster on a regular schedule. Let's track everything and have signals. And these aren't things that we're necessarily arguing against, but the risk is that you can work fast in the wrong direction. So a lot of our roadmap is focused on, yes, providing power tools to salespeople that they can use, but more importantly, how can they work smarter? How can we interpret the signals that are available to us through, for example, like Drew is doing through public web, but from our side at Cirrus Insight, how can we utilize the data that organizations are warehousing in Salesforce? How can we understand how they're scheduling events with their customers, how they're emailing with their customers to deliver to them insights into how they can best pursue the deals? Part of my job here with the sales team is to inspect deals. So to your point earlier, one of the common threads that I see is that if in part of the inspection this looks like a great deal, the person's been using Salesforce for 3 years, they're new to Google Apps, and so this is a perfect template for deals that we tend to win. That's a great answer, but the best answer tends to be, yeah, we had a great call, and did you know that she was also a swimmer in college? And we actually competed against each other. We didn't even know it, but it was 10 years ago. And so, yeah, I think this deal is great. I think we can be useful to them. So it's interesting that those are the deals that will win, almost 100% of the time where there's that human connection with the customer that we're trying to sell to. So we try to emphasize, and it's not very scientific because it's hard to train around in a playbook, but we try to emphasize with our sales team, make the conversations fun and interesting for you, and that'll translate into better sales. if you finish a sales call and all you've done is follow the playbook and done standard PAT discovery questions, it's not going to be that fun for the customer, and honestly, it's going to lead to a lot of burnout. And ours, unfortunately, is a sector, sales, that has a really high level of burnout. I think that's one of the reasons why. It's because we try to mechanize it too much. So if we can make it unique so that every salesperson brings their own personality and skill set to the job, I think it makes it a lot more fun. So that's a very long answer to a short question about roadmap, but all of our R&D tends to focus on how do we leverage the unique aspects that the salesperson brings to the job, and how do we interpret the signals they're getting back from the customers to understand that each customer doesn't fit into the same playbook, that there's a unique dynamic sales playbook that should apply to each customer's situation, and that we can help illuminate that for our customers, for our users.
I guess I can pop in next and let Drew go. For us, it's continuing to close the loop. I mean, we just want to make sure that we're providing the most efficient means possible for one-to-one scheduling. So there's some nuances and there's some things that we're thinking about that how we can kind of further that that feature, just to make sure that it does stay within email, that things are closed, quickly. We do a pretty good job of it now, but there's obviously more that we can do. One of the big use cases we've found, and we get a lot of feedback on, is just SDRs. Recruiters are another big part of our ecosystem, people that use our application. So we've learned a lot from them about what's useful to them. And so we're taking that into account right now and just giving them more capabilities to schedule onto other people's calendars, for example. So simple things like that. But then again, really our focus is keeping it within email, making sure that the loop is closed, and taking out any back and forth or any scheduling conflicts that could arise. So again, back to all the things that we talked about, it just provides a lot of speed. And then, working closer with, the Cirrus Insights, finding out, there's companies out there that have all the contextual details that we, as a company, we fit in very nicely into that type of conversation. So, just having alliances with companies that are like Crystal, Cirrus Insight, et cetera, that are out there doing unique things in the marketplace that natively integrate with what Assistant.to does, that there's no configuration setup. Anything else is, like Brandon said, it's a couple clicks, and you've got a really useful tool that most likely works with the other tools that you use to keep yourself at the most productive you can be during the day. So Drew, I'll let you finish there.
Yeah. So as for Crystal going forward, right now we look like in the market, it looks like a tool. We're much more interested in building the foundation of a very large company. So we're going to be, for the last few months, what we've been doing is just getting as close to the pain points as we possibly can with our customers. And a lot of times that's just email anxiety across sales or recruiting or management or hiring, anything like that. And it's really figuring out what is the most universal problem here, and kind of abstract that away to, what are the basics of human communication that is getting lost in mediums like email or just any communication that involves technology. So to do that, we need the largest, most accurate personality database in the world. And that doesn't just come from our natural language processing technology. That comes from lots of people providing basically confirmation or validation that Crystal's readings are actually right. So in the next month, we're going to be launching kind of the first step towards creating this foundation for the rest of our existence. Just kind of intimidating, a little bit scary, and a little risky. But Crystal's going to look much more like a platform rather than this tool. And the goal is for Crystal to become a verb or just universal, a word that is known among people that, when you want to communicate with somebody, you can check out the Crystal profile person. And this is something that I want to actively share, as a person with my Crystal profile. So it's going to look much more like a platform with a lot of people, with a lot of ability to provide insight into others, not saying stuff about people, but confirming what Crystal says, and basically making it this living, breathing record of qualitative information about somebody. So that's really what we're working towards. And off of that, if we can pull it off successfully and build this large actor personality database, there are just nearly infinite possibilities of what we can continue to build off of that. For sales teams, imagine the ability to take 100 prospects and 10 sales reps and being able to divide up, 10 prospects per rep according to who's just naturally going to get along best. There's all sorts of ways you can combine this data, and that's just one example. But yeah, right now we are definitely in build mode and preparing to lay the foundation for those kinds of things in the future.
I want to ask the group this one, and this is something I see and experience a lot, and to a certain extent it could even put me out of business. But all of these tools do great jobs of helping you get into the conversation, right? And that's awesome. I think there's a lot of people who still struggle, and this is oftentimes what they come to me for is okay, now that I know what I should be talking about, I don't necessarily know how to say it, right? I don't know how to draw in the right customer story, right? I don't understand enough, about, okay, it's great to know that they're this type of personality and I'm this type of personality, but now how do I learn how to actually talk across that bridge? How do I build that bridge as a sales rep, Do you guys see more artificial intelligence coming, from sort of this data stuff that you guys are bringing to the table? Along, obviously, Drew, you're bringing data plus a greater level of context and stuff. But how do you guys see sort of artificial intelligence sort of educating the rep on what to say and how to say it, as opposed to just here's the data around this person or this scenario?
Yeah. I think right now artificial intelligence is a word, along with data science and big data. It kind of gets thrown out there, and probably 90% of the time it's not actually artificial intelligence.
Right.
Anything to do with the real field. It's just a word that marketers know that people will get clicks for.
Right.
But truly, what artificial intelligence is right now, and we talk about machine learning, which is closely related to it, it's very, very nascent. There's a ton of work being done in the field, but almost none of it has really been effectively applied in a commercial sense. And it's just, there's going to be a very, very steep S-curve before you start having all this new technology start to be integrated in workflows. I think the very early part of it that we're seeing is these new personal virtual assistants. Some of them, kind of handle things like scheduling or I call them the VC problems. Generally any problems that VCs experience, I think that's where these are going to get in right away and try to solve. But as we get these larger and larger data sets, both publicly and internal to organizations, we're going to see more, not just like these assistants, but much more machine learning incorporated into these. And that's going to, I think, really, really pick up over the next 3 to 5 years, to the point where, we're no longer using software to just automate things, but we're using software to start doing more thinking for us, which is kind of scary, but also opens us up to think about even higher level things. So I think it's going to be really a real advantage to the people that know the right questions to ask computers.
Great. Perfect way to, the rise of the machines, for a webinar on Halloween week. So I got one more question, and we got about 5 minutes. If there's anybody else who has a question, this one's got a little bit of a long wind-up, and it's definitely going to you, Drew. So, be conscious of what they're paying attention to. So it says that I've tried Crystal Knows and definitely found the advice interesting, to say the least. What I struggle with is knowing if the advice Crystal is giving me, really, really works. It's magical, but that in and of itself is a little bit of, there's a little bit of skepticism, maybe it's a little too good to be true to know this much about this person. And more specifically, Jeff asks, the app itself lacks a data analytics tracking component, so that he'd have to track the ROI manually or use another tool to do so of a Crystal tool. So are there plans to have ways to measure the impact your app is having for them?
Yeah, there's a few questions wrapped up into that, so I'll try to answer each of them pretty quickly. So I guess, first of all, when you talk about, I guess, whether this works or is actually useful, there's kind of two sides. One is this data actually accurate? When I say this person likes spreadsheets, does this person actually like spreadsheets? And the second part of that is because I know this person is very logical in, things like that, does speaking to them in a logical way actually improve our communication, our relationship? First part of that is one of our biggest challenges right now, because the way to validate Crystal is just by looking up yourself and looking up other people. And if Crystal is accurate, it's just, you're basically making the assumption that because Crystal is accurate with these people, it's going to be accurate with these people that I don't know. That has worked decently well for us so far, but there is a very large segment of people who that's never going to work for because they're just not going to trust technology. So that's when I say we're going to be becoming more of a platform. We're attempting to solve that problem by me looking at somebody like Alex, who I've never met in person before, but seeing that people in Alex's network have said that Crystal's right, and therefore validating accuracy so I can go to a conversation confident that this is going to work. So that's the first side. And the second side to it, I really think I struggle with this a lot myself, because when you think about success of using a tool like Crystal, it has short-term implications, definitely, because when you connect with somebody better, you can have that immediate business outcome, like scheduling a meeting, like getting to the next step in the sales cycle, or getting a referral or wherever that is. I think the much bigger play with Crystal is much more qualitative, which makes it harder to measure. But you definitely intuitively know when I connect with a person, or when somebody connects with me and they truly care about me, I immediately want to have a closer relationship with that person, even if they're trying to sell me something and I know that their incentives are lined up to try for me to give them money. I get that feeling as somebody that is being sold to, and as we go along, we're going to have to eventually, and of course I'm selling into the enterprise, figure out how to quantify that. But the people that are the most active, most evangelistic users of Crystal right now are generally people that both have to talk to a lot of new people routinely and also try to develop relationships internally. So that tends to be like executives, founders, entrepreneurs, those types of people. And they just, when we do our customer development interviews, we ask how they validate that Crystal's helping them. And almost all their responses are, this just gives me confidence in my relationships that I'm, when I normally would spend 10, 15 minutes analyzing this email, trying to figure out if I should say hey or hello, or if I'm writing if I'm writing too much, it's kind of like having a reassuring friend that's sitting right next to you. Somebody just used the example of it was a guy that he compared it to texting a new girl that he wanted to date, and he'd have his friend try to check out the text message before he sent it. That's what Crystal did for his business emails. So that's more of the measurement. It's honestly right now it's much more of a qualitative confidence piece rather than saying this is increasing response rates by a certain percentage.
I think it's interesting too, because there was, I think, over the last 10 years, a big focus on marketing and largely around analytics. So there's the age-old saying, 50% of the marketing is working, we just don't know which 50%. And there's more and more analytics available to all of us now through marketing automation and other marketing stack tools. What's interesting, though, I think in spite of all the analytics, which has certainly helped a lot, there's still a ton that's attributable. It is qualitative. It's, hey, that message seems to have resonated at the conference. Can we attribute ROI directly to the banner that we showed at the conference? That's pretty hard. I think we're going to see the same thing with the sales tools. I think that you'll be able to show a level of analytics and ROI based on things like we A/B tested a lot of our email templates. We found the one that seems to be open and replied to the most. Therefore, let's standardize the SDR team on that template. That makes sense. Can we attribute ROI, though, to seeing the person's Salesforce information in the side panel of my inbox allowed me to reply that much faster, and as a result, the deal closed a week earlier than it normally would have, or I was able to win it over a competitor because I replied first? That's really difficult to know. That would be analytics that very few companies would have access to unless you were doing a post-mortem survey of your customers and said, did we win the deal because I responded first because I had a side panel in front of me? That's really hard to tease out. So I think, as has been the case for a long time, sales will continue to benefit from better and better analytics. At the same time, there will still be an art and science to doing sales and connecting with people and knowing that there is intrinsic value to, as the webinar title is connecting with context and empathy. That's just a good idea to do, and that in the short and the long run, it's going to help you to close more deals.
Yeah, I'd add, going back to Jeff's question too, is that one of the things I know about personality tests when you talk particularly with salespeople is that if it's a feature or if it's a psychological impact that the salesperson agrees with, like, yep, they got me right, I'm just like that, the sales rep believes it. But as soon as it tells them something that is equally true but they don't want to admit about themselves, that test is garbage. That psychology stuff never works. And you can't have it both ways. A psych test can't tell you that only your good stuff is right and all of your bad stuff is wrong. So I think you have to be willing to open yourself to understanding your own personality and recognize that, yeah, when it says sometimes you're a jerk when these kind of topics come up or you don't like these kinds of things, it's probably just as right as when it says you're going to crush this part of the deal. So you got to take it all with a grain of salt. So we're actually 2 minutes over. So I want to stop here and if anybody has something they want to end with, that's great. But if not, Brandon, Drew, and Alex, thank you all so much for attending this webinar with us and supporting the Sales Hacker community as a whole. This community is truly a community built upon itself, and whether it's the individuals who joined to listen to this webinar or come to Sales Stack in November in San Francisco, shameless plug, or the CEOs such as yourselves and product managers and stuff. Thank you guys all for contributing to make this an awesome community and improving all of the sales. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thanks
appreciate
for us, and see you all at Sales Stack in a couple weeks.
All right. See you soon.
Thanks, Richard.
Bye, everybody.